It was subtle, but it was there, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, what's wrong?" I led her to the couch and sat across from her, my hands trembling slightly. "I followed you last night," I confessed. "I saw you at the abandoned building." Her expression didn't change. She didn't look shocked or angry. She just stared at me, her face unreadable. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "Why were you there, Adah?" I demanded. "What were you doing, and what's going on with your shadow?" At that, she froze. Her eyes widened slightly, and for the first time I saw fear flash across her face. "You saw it, didn't you?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. "What's happening, Adah? Please just tell me the truth." She looked away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "It's complicated," she said finally. "You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I said, desperation creeping into my voice. For a moment, I thought she might tell me everything, but then she stood up, her expression hardening. "You need to leave it alone," she said. "Some things are better left in the dark." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. That night, the nightmares returned with a vengeance. I dreamed of shadows creeping through my bedroom, their whispers growing louder and more insistent. They called my name, their voices low and guttural, like the sound of wind through broken glass. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The room was dark, but I could feel that I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I sat up, scanning the shadows in the corners of my room. Then I saw it, a shadow darker than the others, lingering by the door. It didn't move, but I could feel its presence like a weight pressing down on my chest. My breath came in short, shallow gasps as I stared at it, too afraid to look away. Finally, I summoned the courage to turn on the light. The shadow disappeared instantly, leaving the room empty and silent once more. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. The next day, a man came to the garage asking for Adah. He was thin and haggard, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame. His eyes were bloodshot, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Are you Nile?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I nodded cautiously. "Yeah, who's asking?" "I need to talk to you," he said urgently. "It's about Adah." My stomach tightened. "What about her?" "She's dangerous," he said, glancing around as if afraid someone might overhear. "You need to get away from her before it's too late." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my heart pounding. "She's cursed," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She'll drain you, take everything from you, your love, your energy, your soul. I've seen it happen." I stared at him, my mind racing. "Who are you?" "I'm her ex," he admitted. "I barely escaped with my life, but you're already in too deep. If you don't leave now, you won't make it out." Before I could ask him anything else, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowded streets. That night, I confronted Adah again. I told her about the man who had come to see me, about his warnings, and his claim that she was cursed. To my surprise, she didn't deny it. Instead, she broke down in tears. "It's true," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I never wanted this. I didn't choose it." She explained that her family had been cursed generations ago after her grandmother made a deal with the spirit to protect their lineage. In exchange, the spirit demanded a price, a piece of the life force of every man who loved one of the women in their family. "I tried to warn you," she said, through her tears. "I told you my past relationships didn't end well, but you wouldn't listen." I sat there in stunned silence, the weight of her words crashing down on me. I wanted to run, to leave and never look back. But when I looked at her, I saw the pain in her eyes, the guilt she carried, and despite everything, I still loved her. Let's deepen the story further, diving into the next sections with the same eerie and immersive tone. The tension intensifies as the truth about Adah unravels. Here's the continuation. After Adah's confession, I couldn't sleep. The weight of her words crushed me. The idea of a curse, a spirit feeding on the lives of men who loved her. But as much as I wanted to run, I couldn't leave her. A part of me clung to the hope that I could save her, that we could find a way to break the curse. The next morning, I began researching everything I could about curses and spirits. I scoured the internet reading articles about Nigerian folklore, traditional rituals, and supernatural entities. None of it offered any real solutions, just vague warnings and half-formed theories. Desperate for answers, I visited a local spiritualist. His shop smelled of incense and was filled with strange objects. Carved figurines, jars of herbs, and candles of every color. I explained the situation to him, hoping he could help. The spiritualist listened carefully, his face grave. When I finished, he shook his head. The spirit tied to her is ancient and powerful, he said. Breaking its hold would require a great sacrifice, perhaps more than you're willing to give. What kind of sacrifice? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked at me with pity in his eyes. Your life, or hers. His words sent a chill down my spine. I left the shop feeling more lost than ever. The shadow that wasn't hers began appearing everywhere. At first, it was subtle, just a fleeting movement in the corner of my eye, gone before I could focus on it. But as the days went on, it became bolder. One night, I was sitting in my room, trying to distract myself with work, when I saw it. It crept along the wall, its form shifting and rippling like black smoke. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow stopped in the corner, hovering there as if watching me. Leave me alone, I whispered, my voice shaking. The shadow didn't move. It just lingered, its presence heavy and suffocating. I turned on every light in the room, hoping to banish it, but it didn't fade completely. It stayed in the darkest corners, a constant reminder that I was never alone. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed, the lights on, staring at the ceiling and listening to the whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. I couldn't take it anymore. The shadow, the whispers, the nightmares, they were driving me to the edge. I decided to confront whatever was haunting me head on. I stood in the middle of my room, the only source of light a dim lamp on the bedside table. My hands trembled as I called out into the darkness. I know you're here, I said, my voice cracking. What do you want from me? For a moment, there was silence. Then, the shadow began to move. It crept toward me, slow and deliberate, its edges curling and twisting unnaturally. You're already mine, it whispered, its voice low and distorted, like the sound of wind through broken glass. I stumbled back, my chest tightening as panic set in. No, I said, shaking my head. You can't have me. The shadow laughed, a chilling guttural sound that echoed in my ears long after it faded. I grabbed my bag and started throwing clothes into it. I couldn't stay here. I had to get away no matter the cost. I decided to leave Lagos without telling Adah. I thought that if I could get far enough away, the curse might lose its grip on me. I bought a bus ticket to Benin City and left in the dead of night, hoping to escape unnoticed. As the bus pulled out of the station, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. The city faded into the distance, and with it, the suffocating weight that had been pressing down on me. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to believe that I might actually be free. But then, the weight returned. My chest tightened, and it felt like something was pressing down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. I gasped for breath, clutching at my chest as my vision blurred. The other passengers on the bus shouted in alarm, but their voices sounded distant, like they were underwater. The last thing I saw before everything went black was Adah's face, not in person, but in my mind, her eyes filled with sorrow and something darker. When I woke up, I was in a hospital. The sterile white walls and the beeping of machines surrounded me, but I couldn't focus on anything but the figure sitting by my bed. Adah. She looked pale, her eyes red from crying. You can't leave, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It won't let you. I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. She reached out to hold my hand, her touch cold and trembling. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted this for you." I wanted to pull away, but I couldn't. My body felt heavy, like I was sinking into the bed. The shadow was there, lurking in the corner of the room, its presence a constant reminder that I was trapped. Now, I live in fear. Adah and I are still together, bound by the curse that neither of us can escape. The love I once felt for her has turned into something else, something tainted by dread and desperation. The shadow is always there, watching, waiting. It follows me wherever I go, a constant reminder of the price I've paid for loving Adah. I've tried to make peace with it, to accept my fate. But I know deep down that it's only a matter of time before it takes me completely. Every night, I lie awake, listening to the whispers and feeling the weight of the shadow pressing down on me. I don't know how much longer I can hold on, but one thing is certain. Love, in its darkest form, can be the cruelest curse of all. This is the end, and please tell me how you feel about this story. Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to please share, like, and subscribe for more content like this.